I am Ethan, and my life seemed perfect until it all came crashing down because of the person I trusted the most. My wife, Grace, betrayed me with my best friend, Mason, and now she is carrying his child. The rage and pain have made me merciless, determined to destroy them both. There was a time when I thought my life was what many people dreamed of. Not because I was rich or lived in luxury, but because I had a stable family, a home full of laughter, and a best friend I could always rely on. Grace and I have been married for over 5 years, and like any other couple, we have had our ups and downs, but I never imagined that those difficulties could make everything go away. I clearly remember her eyes at first, sparkling with a strong belief, as if I was her whole world. We built our home day by day, brick by brick, through sleepless nights, our shared dreams never fading. I worked long hours at a law firm in Seattle, but always made time for Grace to never feel lonely or left out. Every Friday was our day, a simple dinner of takeout sushi, watching romantic movies that Grace loved, although I usually couldn't stand those kinds of things. Mason, my best friend since college, was also an integral part of that life. If there was anyone I trusted more than my wife, it was him. We had known each other since our freshman year at the University of Washington, staying up late to study, laughing through the dreaded calculus together. Over the years, Mason and I have been inseparable, through unemployment, broken relationships, and he once stood by my side at my wedding as best man and told me I was the luckiest man in the world to have Grace. I believed it at the time, but then that luck turned out to be unexpectedly fleeting. Not from the start. Grace and Mason spent too much time together. They had known each other for me and had a strange chemistry. I used to joke that they had some kind of secret because they always had their own stories, collaborations that made me laugh or even feel a little jealous. I didn't mind, on the contrary. I was happy to see my wife and my best friend getting along. But then, little by little, I noticed small changes creeping into our lives. Grace began to distance herself. Conversations became short and cold. When I tried to pick her up at night, she would often turn away or mumble tired words. The phone that used to be on the bedside table now always sat face down, all notifications turned off. I noticed, but kept telling myself, it's okay. It's just a busy period. Mason was different. He started canceling the weekend basketball games we used to play together, citing work as an excuse. My calls often went unanswered, and when we did, he avoided eye contact, cutting me off as if afraid of confrontation. Looking back now, I really hate my naivety. Why did I believe those lame excuses so easily? Why did I ignore the obvious signs? But at the time, I just believed them, to the end. Then Grace started coming home later than usual, smelling of a strange perfume that wasn't mine on her. I reassured myself, telling myself it was just my imagination, the stress of work stressing me out. The house became strangely quiet when I came home late. No sign of her, no text explaining. I sat silently on the sofa, counting the minutes as I waited in vain. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and my phone remained silent. It was just after 2 a.m. when I heard the front door creak open. Grace walked in, heels in hand, her hair tousled like it had been through a storm. Her lips were swollen and red in a way I had never seen them before. I stood there, watching silently, my heart sinking as I realized she knew I was still awake. "Oh," she said, her tone like I was an unnecessary nuisance. "Are you still up?" I calmly asked. "Where are you going?" She hesitated, and that moment said it all. "Working late?" She brushed past me without further explanation. I knew Grace was lying. Her words were so smooth, so rehearsed that they were fake. But I didn't get angry right away, because part of me still clung to the illusion that everything was okay. That this woman, my wife, the woman I'd built my entire world around, would never betray me. If I could go back in time, with my current sanity and experience, I wouldn't have let it go, would have forced her to admit it that night. But I didn't. I let her go, quietly climbed into bed, and then lied to myself that everything would go back to normal, that it was just a fleeting misunderstanding. But no, it was the beginning of the end, and I was the only one who didn't see it. I stood there, watching Grace walk past me as if I were nothing but a ghost. Time seemed to stretch out, not seconds, not minutes. She didn't look back as she tossed her heels near the door and headed up the stairs. I could hear the sound of her skirt being pulled over her head, the flutter of fabric on the floor, and the creak of the bed as she lay down. Just like any other night, as if she hadn't spent those hours in another man's arms. I didn't run after her right away, but sat down on the sofa, the flickering light from the TV playing a late-night show that I didn't care about. My mind felt like it was splitting in two. The rational part knew that something was terribly wrong, that the woman I had sworn to spend the rest of my life with was slowly slipping away from me. But the other part, the part of despair and delusion, kept whispering that maybe I was overreacting, that I was too tired, stressed, and imagining things that weren't true. I convinced myself that with just a frank talk, everything would be cleared up, the misunderstandings would be cleared up, and the cracks would be mended before it was too late. I turned off the TV and climbed slowly up to the bedroom. Each step echoed in the quiet house. Grace lay on her side, her back to me, her breathing steady, but I knew she wasn't asleep. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. She didn't answer. I put my hand on her shoulder, and she immediately jumped. The small movement was enough to shatter a part of my hope. I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can we talk?" She sighed, turning back to look at me with cold, unreadable eyes. "Talk about what?" she replied dryly. I blinked, trying to stay calm. "Today is our anniversary." She closed her eyes, sighing again. "Ethan, I was so busy with work that I didn't notice my phone." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I was so busy, I forgot to check my messages." The lie was obvious. I knew it. She knew it. The air between us became suffocatingly heavy, filled with things neither of us dared to say. I whispered, my voice choked. "Do you have someone else?" At first I thought she would deny it, would sneer, would call me an idiot, but she was silent, and in that silence, I heard the truth. My heart clenched, my breath came short, my hands clenched into fists in my lap. "How long?" I asked, my voice choked. She didn't answer. I looked straight into her eyes, really looked. Her lips were slightly swollen, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine lingering on her skin, her eyes tired not from work but from something deeper. I stood up, my whole body shaking with uncontrollable anger. "Who?" I growled. She was silent and then blurted out, "You don't want to know." I laughed. A dry, short, unfamiliar laugh. "You want to know." She sat up, smoothing her hair, not daring to look straight at me. I could sense the fear in her, fear of looking straight at the truth that I had known for a long time, the feeling of disgust growing in my heart. "Grace," I said, my voice low and commanding, "tell me." She took a deep breath and said, "It's Mason." The world around me collapsed. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, my breath coming out in a gasp. I'd braced myself for the worst, but even the worst hadn't prepared me for that name. Mason. my best friend, my soul brother, the one I'd trusted. I thought I'd misheard, that my mind was playing a cruel trick on me, but she was looking at me, and there was no mistaking the look in her eyes. It was him, all along. I stepped back, needing space, needing to breathe. The room was cramped. The walls seemed to be squeezing me. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst. I wanted to scream, to punch someone, to ask why. But I could only whisper, "How long has it been?" Her lips opened and closed, as if wavering between truth and lie. Finally, she exhaled and said, "A year." I almost collapsed. A year. My best friend, my wife, a whole year of cheating on me behind my back, still laughing and talking to me every day, pretending like nothing happened. And I, the fool, opened my heart, welcomed him into my home as a family member. A choked sigh escaped me, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. I had been betrayed. I had been a fool. I looked at her, the woman I had sworn to love to death, and realized I didn't even know who she was anymore. "I want you to leave the house," I said, my voice hollow. Sadness flashed across her face, but it was gone quickly. "No need," she replied coldly. "Mason and I are moving in together." My heart twisted. "What?" She stood there adjusting her skirt, as if tearing my heart apart with her indifferent gaze. "I love him, Ethan," she said, "and we're having a baby." Silence. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly devastated. I staggered back, my legs shaking unsteadily. She reached out to comfort me, and I quickly moved away. "Get out of here," I said again, my voice shaking. She hesitated, then nodded. Then she walked away, leaving me standing there, broken, beyond repair. I stood in the middle of my house, staring at the empty space where Grace had been, her words like a hammer pounding at my heart. Mason, my best friend, she chose him, and now they were going to have a baby. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms, the searing pain keeping me awake. This wasn't a dream. This was my life. I trudged down to the living room, exhausted, my chest heaving with each breath. I needed a place to sit and think, but who could possibly know how to handle this heartbreak? For a year, the two people I trusted the most had made a fool of me. Grace smiled at me, told me she loved me, while she cheated on me with my best friend who pretended to be my best friend. I laughed dryly, feeling stupid and blind to the truth right in front of me. A rustling sound from upstairs woke me from my hazy daze. I stood up, my feet unsteadily heading up the stairs. Up there, Grace was quietly packing her things, preparing to leave the house we once called home, to return to Mason. I should have screamed, yelled for answers, forced her to stop, chased her away, but I didn't. I stood still at the foot of the stairs, listening to the rustle of fabric, the jingle of the jewelry box in her hands. It was all so surreal, it was unbelievable. Then she stepped down, one hand dragging an old suitcase, the other hand gently placed on her bulging belly that was clearly visible through her loose shirt. I didn't dare look her in the eye. Grace hesitated, as if she wanted to say something but then stopped, sighing. "You'll be fine, Ethan." I laughed bitterly, my voice choked. "Oh, really? Thank you for your assurance, Grace." She blinked, a flash of guilt crossing her face, then disappeared in the dim light outside the door. "Mason will come get your things later," she said softly, like a cold promise. I clenched my jaw. Of course, that coward was probably avoiding me tonight, afraid I would do something crazy. I just nodded, coldly replying, "Good." Grace looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with emotions I couldn't name. Then, without another word, walked out the door, slamming it behind her. And so, my marriage ended. I stood there coldly, listening to the sound of the engine roaring, then the sound of the wheels rolling away, tears naturally flowing. I collapsed onto the old sofa, my chest constricted as if someone was squeezing it. The pressure of all the things pressing down on my shoulders at the same time made me gasp for breath. I felt like I had lost everything, like my life had fallen into a bottomless abyss. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring blankly at the empty wall in front of me. Time seemed to stop, and then the phone suddenly vibrated on the table. I picked it up, hoping it was Grace, calling to apologize, saying it was all a terrible mistake. But no, it was Mason. I looked at his name on the screen, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst, my hands shaking as I pressed the answer button. Silence. Then a tired sigh from the other end of the line. Ethan, I'm sorry. I hung up, unable to listen any longer, not after what they had done to me. I wanted to scream, to smash, to run to wherever they were and make them feel some of the pain I felt. But what was the point? Grace was gone, Mason had won, and I was just a broken man sitting alone in a cold house. The following days were like a misty rain. I didn't go to work, didn't answer the phone, and ate and drank haphazardly. News of Grace's love affair quickly spread among my friends, colleagues, and the society around me. Some sent condolences, as if I had just experienced a tragedy. Others were indifferent. And even those who used to call me friends didn't care at all. One day, I received a text message from an old best friend of Grace's, saying that I should be happy that they found new happiness, that maybe Grace and I weren't meant to be. I looked at the message with my blood boiling, angry. Happy? Happy that my wife abandoned me like trash? Happy that my best friend stole the person I love? Without hesitation, I deleted the message and blocked that number. Nothing else mattered. Then one day there was a knock on the door. I opened it, thinking it was a coworker coming to offer condolences, but it wasn't. It was Sophia, Mason's ex-girlfriend. She stood there, arms crossed, a half-hearted smirk on her face. "Hi, Ethan," she said, tilting her head sarcastically. "Looks like we're in the same boat, huh?" I blinked at her in a daze, not expecting to see her at this time. Sophia sneered and said, "I'm surprised to see you. I think we should talk about the two people who betrayed us." I quietly opened the door and invited her in. I had no idea that this meeting would change everything. Sophia walked into the house that Grace and I had built up over the years, now an empty shell. She looked around, her eyes sharp, noticing the half-empty bottle of wine on the table, the untouched lunchbox, the mess I hadn't bothered to clean up since Grace left. "You look like a zombie," she said bluntly, throwing her bag on the sofa. I just laughed dryly, rubbing my temples. Yeah, what else could I expect? My wife left me for her best friend. Sophia sneered, crossing her arms over her chest. Change that. They left us and went with each other. You're not the only one who was abandoned, Ethan. I looked at her carefully for the first time. Sophia still had her long black hair. Her eyes were sharp as knives, and her aura was always attention-grabbing. But now there was something different in her eyes, a sharpness and determination. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice hoarse from long days of alcohol and silence. She smiled sarcastically. "Because I am not the type to forgive betrayal, and I think you are not either." I frowned and shook my head. "What are you talking about?" "I mean them, Ethan." Sophia leaned closer to me. "Grace and Mason not only betrayed us, they humiliated us. Are you just going to sit there and let them win?" I laughed bitterly, sat down on the sofa, and sighed. What do you want me to do? Is Sophia planning to break into their house and drag them out by their hair? She raised her eyebrows and smiled coldly. That's good, but no. I have a better plan. I slowly sighed, rubbing my tired face. Sophia, I'm not in the mood for such revenge. I just want to get through it. She looked at me, her expression softening a little. I understand, Ethan. The first week after Mason left me for Grace, I was crazy too, but I realized it wasn't us who suffered, it was them. I tilted my head and asked curiously, what are you going to do to make them suffer? Sophia leaned down, her voice whispering but firm. The Mason Company is on the brink of bankruptcy. I was startled. What? She smiled slowly. He doesn't like to say it, but I know it well. If we know how to play it right, we can make him lose everything. I should have refused, said no to revenge, but something dark and hurt inside me was caught up in that storm. Go on, I sighed. Sophia chuckled, knowing I would think so. Sophia left me that night, but her words still echoed in my mind, like a knife stabbing unceasingly. I tried to stand up, tried to piece together the broken pieces of my life, pretended that I could return to normal, but normal had now become an alien concept. The following weeks turned into a series of angry, drunken days and sleepless nights. I avoided work calls, ignored any lingering messages from friends, and ate just enough to get through my meals. One night, in a daze and boredom, I happened to drive by Grace and Mason's new house. The mansion was a magnificent, imposing mansion in a gated community in Bellevue, one of the most expensive in the area. Through the large glass windows, I caught a glimpse of the warm yellow light from the living room, and the sight made my heart sink. Grace curled up on the plush sofa, her head resting on Mason's shoulder, who was stroking her hair lovingly and whispering something that made her laugh. I should have been there. That should have been our life, our future, but it was all just a memory. My hands gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and I was filled with a mixture of betrayal and pain. They didn't seem guilty or ashamed, like they'd never hurt anyone, just happy together. That was the moment I realized I was broken inside. The next morning, I called Sophia. My voice was cold and unsociable. Tell me all about Mason's company, she replied easily, seemingly satisfied. I think you'll agree to this plan. Let's meet at a quiet cafe downtown, away from prying eyes. There, Sophia spilled the beans. Mason's company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Money was leaking, investors were fleeing, major clients were losing confidence. We just need to push it a little further, she said, stirring her coffee. I frowned. Push it how? Sophia chuckled. Simple, make his biggest investor pull out for good. I sighed. How can I do that? She leaned over, her eyes sharp. Let me take care of it. While Sophia was destroying Mason, I promised myself to rebuild. I threw myself into work, accepting a job offer from a prestigious investment firm, Mason's biggest competitor. The CEO, Mr. Hargrove, quickly took notice of me and gave me plenty of opportunities to shine. Within weeks, I was promoted to one of the firm's most promising young strategists. I started working out every day at the gym, cut out alcohol, and poured all my energy into my work. As the days passed, I felt myself coming back to life. But I was no longer the weak, trusting man Grace had abandoned. I was dead, and the man who was coming back to life was someone who would make them pay dearly. 3 months passed, and Mason lost his biggest investor. Sophia did a great job of convincing the investor that his company had become too risky and unreliable. The fallout spread like wildfire. Rumors spread, Customers withdrew en masse, and Mason panicked. Grace, meanwhile, was still imagining their perfect life together. Pregnant with Mason's child, she played the devoted wife and took care of Mason, planning the future while the entire house was crumbling from the inside. Mason was frantically trying to keep the empire together, unaware that the person behind the scenes was me, the person he had betrayed. And this is just the beginning. I was determined not to stop until I had everything back, just as they had taken my life. The signs were subtle at first. Mason began to show signs of stress, with dark circles under his eyes, erratic behavior, and sharper words than before. I watched his every move, his every mistake, relishing the feeling of watching the man who had destroyed me crumble. Grace, as usual, was blinded by her happy family role, unaware that their house was falling apart. What pleased me most was that she had no idea that I had quietly set a trap right next to it. Sophia and I met again at a fancy restaurant downtown. She was resplendent in an expensive black dress, sipping martinis as if we were just enjoying a casual date, not plotting to ruin someone's life over a few appetizers. "Are you still following Mason?" Sophia asked, her eyes glinting sharply, a sarcastic smile playing on her lips. I nodded, stirring my whiskey. "He's going downhill." She leaned toward me, her voice low. "Good. Now we have to speed things up." I raised my eyebrows. "How?" Sophia sneered. "You have Mr. Hargrove, your boss, in the palm of your hand, right?" I exhaled and nodded in agreement. Mr. Hargrove became a trusted advisor and one of the biggest investors in the city. With him, we could control the flow of information. "I think it's time to feed Mason some false rumors," Sophia continued, stirring her drink. "Make sure influential people believe his company is on the brink of bankruptcy and push it even further down the cliff." I smiled wickedly. "You are so cruel." She smiled slyly. "And I like it." The next day, I met Mr. Hargrove in his modern office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city of Seattle. "I heard you were after Whitmore Capital?" I asked, referring to Mason. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Yes, it's in serious trouble, isn't it?" I nodded. "It's more difficult than they announced. Cash flow is almost dry. Investors are starting to worry." He raised his eyebrows. "How do you know that?" I leaned in, my voice firm. "It's just, I have a reliable source." He looked at me for a moment and then nodded. "If that's true, this might be the time for us to consider stopping all cooperation with them." I sipped my coffee, hiding my joy. That decision seems very reasonable. With just one conversation, I planted the seed of doubt. When the rumor reached the ears of those in power, Whitmore Capital would receive a fatal blow without knowing the source. A week later, I heard from acquaintances that Mason had lost another major investor, and his company was officially in trouble. The best part was that he had no idea that I was the one behind it all. I imagined Mason sitting in his office, looking at his empty balance sheet, watching his empire slowly crumble around him. He had taken my wife. Now I was going to take everything else from him. But I never stopped. I wanted Mason to lose more than that. I wanted Grace to start doubting him, the beginning of unrelenting regret. I ran into Grace, or so she thought, at a small coffee shop near my office. She was sitting alone, her belly clearly visible. I felt more alert and sharp than ever, both physically and mentally. Work was now my battleground. I took on bigger projects, worked longer hours, and within months my reputation at Hargrove was soaring. Clients were mentioning my name, directors were nodding when I walked into meetings. I don't just survive, I thrive, and what satisfies me most is that they don't know. While I was climbing to the top, Mason was sinking into the depths. Sophia kept me updated. Mason lost another contract. He looked like he was about to collapse in his office. Investors are pulling out en masse. The company is bleeding badly. Rumor has it he's starting to panic. I read the messages and smiled to myself. Everything was going according to plan. Rumors, lost contracts, financial pressures were tightening. The best part is, Mason still hasn't realized it. The destroyer is right in front of him. It's me. Then came the moment I expected. The cracks began to show. It started with a dinner without Grace, who said Daniel had to work late. In truth, he was struggling with his small business. But that was just part of the thick veil they kept up. I overheard their tense conversation at a public cafe, where Grace reached for Daniel's hand, but he pulled away, avoiding it. I saw the weary look in her eyes when she thought no one was looking, but I didn't miss a thing. And it wasn't just me. Sophia, my new best friend, made sure I was in the loop. One night, Sophia called me, her voice mixed with humor and amusement. "You can't imagine." I shrugged. "Try saying it." She sneered. "I ran into Grace at the doctor's office today. She came alone without Daniel." I clenched the phone in my hand, feeling choked up and angry. Maybe it's a pregnancy test. In Sophia's voice, I heard deep contempt. "Grace looks miserable, Ethan," she said. Like she's just realized she's traded gold for trash. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. "Good." Sophia giggled. "You should have seen her face when I told her I had a new boyfriend." I stopped, my eyes suspicious. "What did you say?" She replied, a wry smile on her lips. "I would suggest that my life is much better now that someone treats me like a queen." I chuckled and shook my head. "You are so cruel, and I like it." I don't deny her words, because it's the truth. While Grace and Daniel were acting for a year, creating a fake family, I was busy building a new life, making plans, becoming the man no one could touch. And now, the next step in that plan had arrived. I hadn't seen Grace for months, not since the night I was sure she saw how well I, a strong Ethan, without her, was doing. But then one day, as I turned the corner of a Seattle mall, I saw her standing there, pushing a baby stroller. I almost laughed at the irony. Grace, once so full of life, was now tired, her hair disheveled, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes, her clothes still fashionable, but no longer holding the elegance of her past. This was not the Grace I had known, but a worn, broken version. She looked up, meeting my eyes. Her face was pale, her lips parted as if to say something, then closed. I smiled scornfully. "Grace." She swallowed, her voice trembling. "Ethan." I saw a storm of emotions in her eyes, shock, regret, and maybe a faint glimmer of longing. I held on to the moment, savoring the feeling of her twisting under my gaze. Then I took action, turning the tables. I looked down at the stroller. "So this is the child you gave up everything for?" Grace frowned, trying to stay calm. "Ethan, don't—" I cut her off, snickering. "Relax, Grace, I'm just talking." I looked straight at her, slowly. "You look different." Her lips pressed together. "It's been a year." I tilted my head, looking sarcastic. "Is that so?" Grace sighed heavily, turned away, avoiding my eyes. "You wouldn't understand." I laughed out loud, so genuinely that it startled her. "Oh, Grace, I understand more than you think." Her eyes immediately returned to my face, searching for any sign of weakness, but there was none. The man standing before her was not someone she had so easily discarded, and she knew it. I saw it in the hesitation, in the trembling of her fingers on the cart handle. She expected me to collapse, bitter, pitiful, but I was growing, and it hurt her. I could have ended the story there, walked away, and left her to regret. But life has no place for such cheap pleasures. I leaned over, lowered my voice, and said each word so Grace couldn't help but hear. I heard about Daniel. Her shoulders stiffened. That name? I shrugged, feigning indifference. His company is collapsing. He is in debt and can't handle the pressure. Grace's face paled, confirming what I had suspected. Their perfect life was just a facade. I smiled disdainfully. It won't take long. She exhaled so hard, for a moment I thought she might cry. Then the moment I had been waiting for finally came. Grace whispered softly, I made a mistake. Boom! The confession echoed through the air. It was regret. It was proof that I had won. I let the words hang in the air for a few seconds, then chuckled and took a step back. Yes, I was wrong. Her eyes looked at me with despair. Ethan, I raised my hand to interrupt. Stop talking, Grace. And right at that moment, as if the universe had arranged, Sophia appeared beside me, put her arm around me, and smiled brightly and understandingly. Hi, honey. Sorry I'm late. I turned to her, my smile wide. It's okay, honey. Then I kissed Sophia slowly, deliberately, long enough for Grace to see. When I pulled away, it was as if she had been slapped in the face, her mouth opening and closing helplessly. For the first time in her life, Grace was silent, and it was the sweetest revenge I have ever known. I squeezed Sophia's hand, nodded to Grace, and without another word, walked away, leaving her standing there, drowning in regret, right where she belonged. I walked beside Sophia, feeling relief after more than a year of turmoil. For the first time, I was no longer the one standing in the rubble. No, Grace was the one being defeated now, and it felt, oh my God, good. But I'm not done yet. The next phase of the plan is going to be much more exciting. The consequences of this meeting will leave indelible marks. I could feel Grace's eyes on my back as I left the mall with Emily. She stood there, filled with a mixture of emotions, shock, hurt, and deep jealousy. I wanted her to sit there feeling that way, to feel the hurt she had caused herself. I didn't want her to look back. I didn't want her to turn around, but I wanted her to yearn for it, to want it back, to take back the life she had thrown away, to realize that she had lost the best thing she had ever had. Emily seemed to realize it too, because as soon as we pulled into the parking lot, she let out a satisfied laugh. Tired? See Grace's face? She leaned against my car, her eyes glowing with satisfaction. Look, she looks like she wants to crawl into a deep hole. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. Grace had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences of her wrong choice. It wasn't long before I knew Grace would find a way to get back in touch with me. It was something that often happened to people like her. Sure enough, just 2 days later, I received a text message from an unknown number. Before I opened it, I knew who it was. Grace, can we talk? I looked at the phone screen and gave her a cold smile. Little did she know that she was falling into the trap I had carefully set. I didn't reply right away, leaving her waiting in vain. An hour later, a second message popped up. Grace, please, Jason. This is important. What was important now? Where was the sense of urgency when she'd cut me out of her life, when she'd chosen Mason over me? I took a sip of bourbon, intending to ignore it, but then an idea flashed through my mind. Meet me at Sunrise Cafe at 7 p.m. No questions, no explanations. I knew she would come because she needed me, even if she didn't realize it right away. The meeting that changed everything. At exactly 6:55 p.m., I was sitting quietly in a hidden corner of the cafe, casually scrolling through my phone as if nothing was happening. At exactly 7:03, Grace walked in. She looked worried, her eyes scanning the cafe before stopping at me. When she looked straight into my eyes, I saw regret, longing, and deep despair. I gestured for her to sit across from me, keeping my face cold and expressionless. She hesitated, then sat down, saying nothing. The silence between us lasted for what felt like a century. Only her eyes tried to examine and understand the change in me. Finally, she broke the silence. "You look different," I sneered. "I know." She was a little startled, but I didn't care. I didn't come here to comfort her. I came to see her fall. She swallowed, tucked her sweaty hair behind her ear, and said, "Jason, I raised my hand to interrupt. "Why did you come here?" She sighed, her voice slack. I needed to see you." I leaned back, pretending to be tired. "Why?" She hesitated, then said the words I had been waiting for all this time. "I was wrong." I almost laughed, but instead I just tilted my head, pretending to be curious. Her eyes searched for a piece of the man in me who had loved her, but unfortunately had died long ago. "I thought Mason was the right choice," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I thought we had a future." I raised my eyebrows. She looked down at her hands. But now I realize I was wrong. I let the words sink in like a death blow, watching her writhe in pain, then finished. "Too bad." My voice was cold, emotionless, because I had moved on long ago. She stood up, her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something but remained silent. She thought I would open my arms to her, forgive her and give her a second chance, but I was no longer that person. Now she had to live with her choice. I stood up, threw a few bills on the table. "Take care, Grace." Then turned and walked away, never looking back again. I had won, and she, just an old wound that I would never allow myself to hurt again. Leaving the coffee shop for the first time in over a year, I felt strangely lighthearted. No longer haunted by Grace's betrayal, no longer tormented by anger, no longer trapped in a spiral of what-if despair. I just stood there watching her collapse, witnessing her finally pay the price for her wrong choice. What pleased me most was that now, I no longer felt anything for her. No sadness, no pain, no regret. Because Grace was no longer an important part of my life. But Mason was different. Mason was on the verge of collapse. His world began to shake violently. A few days after meeting Grace, my longtime friend Sophia called as soon as I picked up the phone, giggling with humor. "You won't believe what I just found out." I chuckled. "Tell me." She told me right away. Mason's company just officially went bankrupt. He's in a series of legal troubles. He's in debt. Investors are accusing him of fraud. I leaned back in my chair, smiling with satisfaction. "That's great." Sophia nodded. "I knew you'd like this news. I love that while Grace is living with regret, Mason is paying for all his mistakes and lies. And the sweetest part is that he still doesn't know who is behind all this devastation. But he will know." The next night, my phone rang suddenly in the silence of my apartment. I frowned at the screen. Mason. I had let it ring 3 times, and curiosity drove me to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice hoarse from waking up. Silence. Then his voice came through, shaking, exhausted, frustrated. "Ethan, I need help." I stifled a laugh and replied, "What kind of help, my friend?" He gasped, "It's my company. I don't know what's going on." "You don't know?" I interjected, feigning surprise. "Oh, it must be hard." Mason hesitated. "Ethan, please. I'm dying. Investors are dropping me. Attorney fees are mounting. And Grace? He stopped abruptly. I leaned back, smiling coldly. "Oh, what do you want me to help you with?" That was the last time I heard his voice. I wanted to scream, to rush in and destroy everything, to make him feel the pain I had endured. But what would be the point? I had watched Mason's empire crumble from afar, and I had learned that revenge was not only sweet, but addictive. Every time I heard his name associated with failure, lawsuits, or bad rumors, I felt a sense of justice being served, a sense of satisfaction, and I knew I wouldn't stop there. It will all end when he is left empty-handed. After that call, Mason disappeared from the corporate limelight. Sophia updated me every few days. He's trying to negotiate with his creditors, but he's not succeeding. Investors are demanding a full audit, and if it's as I suspect, it's over. Then a fraud investigation was launched, revealing that Mason had been cooking the books for years, manipulating financial statements to hide losses. When the authorities got involved, everything fell apart. Assets were seized, the company was shut down, and Mason was left with nothing. No savings, no backup plan, no way out. I was sure of it. Not long after, Grace tried to contact me. I saw the first call, her name flashing across the screen like a ghost. I didn't answer. Then came the text. "Grace, Ethan, please, let's talk. Ethan, I know I was wrong, but I need to see you. I really regret it." I chuckled at the last message. It was too late. She had chosen her path. And now she had to live with the consequences. I left that message there, didn't reply, and continued with the new life I chose. I was no longer the man she left behind, and she was just a period in the past that I didn't want to remember. Just when I thought it was over, Mason came to my office. I was sitting in my office on the top floor of a building in downtown Seattle, looking down at the distant lights when my secretary walked in. "Mr. Mason Whitmore is here to see you." I smiled slowly. Let him in. The door opened and Mason walked in, the man who had stolen my wife and destroyed my family, now a broken ghost. His suit was wrinkled, his beard was bushy, his gait was hunched, his eyes were bewildered and tired. I let him stand there for a moment, enjoying the humiliation. Then I gestured for him to sit down. Mason hesitated, then slowly sat down, his hands shaking slightly. I folded my arms, tilted my head, and asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" Mason didn't dare look at me, then opened and closed his mouth as if trying to find the words. Finally, he whispered, "You won't help me." I smiled coldly. "No, Mason, I won't." With one last look at the broken man before me, I stood up, walked to the door, opened it, and said, "Get out." He hesitated for a second, then stood up, shoulders slumped with the weight of betrayal, and walked silently out of my office. And just like that, Mason Whitmore was left empty-handed, and I was finally free.